जय भारत। वेलकम टू डेफ टॉक्स क्लिप्स बाय आदि अचिंत। जैसे ही आपने मेरे बड़े चैनल जो डेफ टॉक्स बाय आदि है उसको आपने जिस तरह से सपोर्ट करा, उसी तरह से ये हमारे क्लिप्स के चैनल को, जहां पर आपको छोटे छोटे अपडेट्स, छोटे छोटे शॉर्ट्स और छोटी छोटी कहानियां मिलेंगी, इसी को भी सपोर्ट जरूर कीजिएगा। लाइक का बटन जरूर दबाइए, सब्सक्राइब तो ऑब्वियसली करिए, बेल आइकॉन दबाना बिल्कुल मत भूलिएगा। एंड हाँ जी, प्लीज अपने दोस्तों के साथ, फैमिलीज के साथ ये वीडियोस जरूर शेयर करिएगा। एंजॉय करिए ये क्लिप को। जय हिंद। Explain to us with regards to the positioning within the Indo-Pacific, and you've got some wonderful maps to explain to us. I want you to kind of put that into perspective as well. Why is it everything is it's a game of Chinese way, you just keep playing it. They are in advantage in certain areas, they're also in disadvantage in certain areas. But what is also interesting to analyze is that why are we putting it in a zero sum game that, oh, this is lost? Because that's the narrative that we hear when that's not the story on the ground.
You mean
Why
like
aren't
this country is
calling out
lost
the
to China, or
yeah,
what do you mean?
why aren't
Yeah,
we
okay,
calling
yeah.
out the reality? Because a lot of it's just rhetoric. Oh, Uyghurs, oh, COVID, oh, Xi Jinping, oh, authoritarian. That doesn't stick. Why is it that everything is a zero sum game with regards to a narrative?
So that's an important question. Um, there are two. I'm going to look at it from kind of two ways. One is the Chinese. Have we talked about comprehensive national power? I can't remember. Did we? Right. Yeah.
We referred it one time.
Okay. So I'm going to go over it just quickly, maybe a little. So the Chinese think tanks uh, ha, rank the world, rank countries in the world numerically in terms of their assessment of the country's comprehensive national power, which is very comprehensive. So it includes, everything that countries normally would include, like economics or military strength or political influence, things like that. But they include many, many other things. And if, for example, China controls the active pharmaceutical ingredients for India's pharmaceutical sector, then that counts towards China's comprehensive national power, not India's, because they're actually in control of India's pharmaceutical sector, right? So they have a different way of looking at it, um, and it is numerical and consistently calculated. And so in that context, it's worse than a zero sum game, because if your goal is, as the Chinese Communist Party is, to be number one in the world in terms of comprehensive national power, you can do that in two ways. One, you get better. The other, you knock the other guy down, right? So in the case of COVID, if you have an epidemic, if you have a terrible disease that's running through Wuhan, and you know it's going to affect your economy, and you have this comprehensive national power outlook, then you do what the Chinese did, which is you block the internal flights, you try to contain it internally, and you try to push out as much of the disease to the rest of the world as you can through international flights. And while that contagion is happening, you position yourself for PPE, and you start working more on on treatments and things like that, right? So if you're going to take a hit, you make sure everybody else takes a worse hit. That's very consistent with the comprehensive national power outlook. They overplayed their hand in several different ways, but that's why it's worse than a zero sum game. You can end up in the negatives with that kind of an outlook. Um, does this make sense to you?
Yeah, because that's one of my biggest points about anything else. When the and for the lack of a better word, the leftist ecosystem goes after India, it's not a zero sum game.
Mm.
But when it goes after China, it's a zero sum game always. It's like, it's the same story repeated over and over again, and the Chinese know how to kind of deal with it. But with
Yeah.
the rest of democracies, they find a new angle every time, to kind of control them or whatever it is. And that's something which is very interesting to me, because well, you deal with China in the same manner every time. China knows what's coming to it, and it knows what it needs to say. It's such a simple thing for him.
Well,
He just comes, he walks off.
it also doesn't have. I mean, democracies have groups inside of them
Yeah.
that, for legitimate or questionable reasons, might be willing to support that narrative. So you have no NGOs running around China talking about problems with the Chinese, with ripping organs out of live political prisoners and selling them to tourists. Right? That happens in China. Where are the NGOs in China that are talking about it? But
Hmm.
you have a problem in India or the US or something like that, there will be NGOs and media and others who will highlight the issue. So there's no reciprocity there. There's no level playing
Hmm.
field in the information field. And in some cases, um, it's completely legitimate to suspect that the Chinese and the Russians and everybody else that can benefit from internal fragmentation or weakening of state, the Iranians as well, in the case of the West, might be backing anything from environmental NGOs to other types of NGOs. I mean, we know that there are cases of U.S. military bases that wanted to expand training and things like that, and suddenly all these environmental NGOs pop up and stop that ability to expand, right? And then you have to look into where the funding is and that kind of stuff. China doesn't have any of those problems,
Yep.
so it's
Sometimes you really wonder, sorry, but sometimes you
yeah,
really
yeah.
wonder, is the world actually serious about dealing with China? Because you do all that and then you sit down and do business with it. And we now see Canadian revelations, American. By the way, there was a news yesterday. Americans are still doing virus research with China. Still.
Yeah,
And that's something that you wonder. I mean, if we do that, we won't be allowed anywhere. They'll probably put a steel cage around India. You can't move out. But that's the whole thing.
I mean,
Anyways, let's get through the. Yeah.
just to go back a step,
Mm.
America is still doing business with a country that throws people in jail for their faiths or political beliefs and rips out their organs and sells them to tourists. Right? Like, you don't have to get any further down the line than that. They have the organ sale industry in China should be enough for everybody to say, yeah, we don't want your stuff here. We don't want to pump any more money into your system and keep you going. So there's what else do you need?
Yep.
And
जय हिंद. जाने से पहले मैं 1 मिनट के लिए आपको रोक लूं, तो प्लीज ये चैनल को लाइक जरूर करिएगा, सब्सक्राइब करिएगा, और हाँ, हमारे जो मेन चैनल को जरूर जरूर अपनी फॉलोशिप दीजिए, ताकि हम आपको अच्छे अच्छे पॉडकास्ट, इंपॉर्टेंट सब्जेक्ट्स एंड जियोपॉलिटिकल अपडेट से आपके सामने प्रेजेंट करते रहें इसी तरह से. थैंक यू सो मच. जय हिंद, जय भारत.